The two suns burned hot in the sky above the small trading post. Maya Collins wiped sweat from her face with a dirty cloth. Her hands shook a little as she counted her water bottles. 3 bottles left. Maybe 4 days of life if she was very careful. The metal roof of her little building made everything hotter inside. She could hear the wind howling outside like it always did on this red planet. The trading post stood alone in an ocean of red sand. There were no other human buildings for hundreds of kilometers. Her father had built this place many years ago. He died 6 months back and left Maya with his debts and his dreams. He always said this was the last honest trading route in the outer colonies. Maya was 23 years old and she was dying slowly in the desert heat. The supply shuttle should have come 2 weeks ago. It never arrived. The radio broke during the last sandstorm. The nearest human town was 300 kilometers away. Maya knew she would die if she tried to walk that far in this heat. So she stayed and waited and hoped someone would remember she existed out here. Around midday, she heard a strange sound. It was different from the wind. A kind of thumping noise that made her grab her father's old plasma rifle. She went to the window and looked out into the bright desert. The light was so strong it hurt her eyes. Something was moving out there in the sand. Maya pushed the door open and stepped outside. The heat hit her like a wall. It was hard to breathe. The thing in the sand was crawling toward her post. It moved slowly, but it did not stop. As it came closer, Maya saw what it was and her heart jumped in her chest. An Indian. That was what the colonists called them. The real name was Nahua, but most humans just said Indian, because they looked a bit like the old people from Earth history books. They were tall with copper-colored skin and long black hair. The Nahua had lived on this planet for thousands of years before humans came with their ships and mines and promises. This one was hurt very badly. Maya could see a deep cut across his chest. His leg was bent wrong, blue blood mixed with the red sand behind him making a purple trail. The Nahua had blue blood instead of red. It looked strange in the sunlight. Maya knew she should close the door and lock it. Things were bad between humans and the Nahua these days. There had been fights at the mining sites. Some Nahua warriors had attacked human equipment. The colonial governor told everyone to stay away from them. He said they were dangerous, but Maya did not close the door. She ran to him instead. She did not think about it. She just moved. The warrior was surprisingly light when she grabbed him and pulled him toward the shade of her building. His eyes were golden and very strange. They watched her with pain and doubt. Maya grabbed her medical kit from the shelf. Her father always kept it full even when they had no money for other things. The wound on the warrior's chest was deep and full of infection. Something sharp and dirty had cut him. Maya knew the Nahua needed water just like humans did. Maybe even more in this terrible heat. She looked at her 3 bottles of water. 3 bottles between her and death. Her hand moved to one bottle and she picked it up. She opened it and brought it to his lips. He drank fast and desperate. Water spilled down his chin and onto the floor. When the bottle was empty, Maya opened a second one and gave him that too. Now she had 1 bottle left. 1 bottle for maybe 2 days. But the warrior was breathing better now. His golden eyes were clearer. Maya started to clean his wounds with cloth and medicine. She had never been this close to a Nahua before. She saw complex patterns tattooed on his arms. The patterns seemed to move in the light. He was probably a warrior, maybe one of the ones who attacked the human mines. She should be scared. Her people would be angry if they knew what she was doing. But Maya did not feel afraid. She felt something else. A connection, maybe. 2 living things trying to survive in a world that wanted them dead. After she finished wrapping bandages around his wounds, the warrior spoke. His voice was rough, but the words were clear English. All the Nahua learned human languages. They had to if they wanted to survive. He asked why she helped him. Maya sat back on the floor. She was so tired. She told him it was because he needed help. That was all. The warrior studied her face for a long time. He said her people would not do the same thing. They would let him die. Maya told him she was not like her people. He closed his eyes and Maya thought he passed out. But then he spoke again very quietly. He said his name was Tenoch. He was a warrior of the Red Canyon clan. Maya told him her name was Maya Collins. She said she owned this dump of a trading post. The warrior smiled just a little bit. He said he was in her debt now. The rest of the day passed slowly. Maya sat near Tenoch and watched him sleep. She thought about what she had done. She had given away most of her water to save someone her people called an enemy. The colonial government would call her a traitor. They might even arrest her if they found out. But sitting there in the hot little trading post, Maya did not feel like she had made a mistake. She looked at Tenok's face while he slept. He looked peaceful now. The pain lines were gone. His breathing was steady and strong. Maya wondered what his life was like before humans came to this planet. Did he have a family? Did he have friends who were looking for him right now? Would they think humans killed him? The two suns began to set outside. The sky turned orange and purple. The temperature dropped a little bit, but it was still very hot. Maya drank a tiny sip from her last bottle of water. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her head hurt from dehydration, but she was glad she saved Tenok. Whatever happened next, at least she had done one good thing in this terrible place. Night came and the desert got cold. That was how it worked on this planet. Burning hot during the day and freezing at night. Maya wrapped herself in an old blanket and tried to sleep. But she kept waking up to check on Tenok. Each time his breathing was still steady. Each time she felt a little bit of relief. She had saved a life today. That had to count for something. Maya woke up before the suns rose. The trading post was dark and cold. She looked around quickly and her heart sank. Tenok was gone. The bandages she had wrapped so carefully were folded in a neat pile on the floor. Her last bottle of water was still there, sitting next to the bandages. He had not taken it even though he probably needed it. Next to the water bottle was something else. A small stone carved into the shape of a bird with its wings spread wide. Maya picked it up and felt how smooth it was. The stone was still warm, like someone had been holding it. This was a gift from Tenok, or maybe it was a promise. She was not sure which. The day started like all the others. Hot and lonely and hard. Maya tried to fix the broken radio, but she did not know enough about electronics. After an hour, she gave up and threw the tools across the room in frustration. She drank tiny sips from her last water bottle. Her lips hurt. Her head pounded. She was so thirsty it was hard to think straight. As the two suns moved across the sky, Maya sat in the shade and looked at the carved bird. She wondered where Tenok was now. Was he home safe? Was he with his people? Did they know a human had helped him? She put the small stone in her pocket and felt a little less alone. The afternoon heat was terrible. Maya could barely move. She lay on the floor and tried not to think about water, but that was all she could think about. Cold, clean water, rivers and lakes and rain, things this desert planet did not have much of anymore. The human mining operations used so much water. They pumped it from deep underground and used it to process the minerals they dug up. The Nahua said the humans were stealing their future. Maybe they were right. As the suns began to set, Maya dragged herself to the window. The sky was turning orange and purple again. It was beautiful in a harsh way. Then she saw something that made her forget about the beauty. Things were moving out in the desert. Lots of things. At first, Maya thought the heat was making her see things that were not there. The desert did that sometimes. It showed you water when there was only sand. It showed you buildings when there was only rock. But as the figures got closer, she knew they were real. Very real. Hundreds of Nahua warriors were walking toward her trading post. Maybe more than hundreds. Their bodies were painted with bright colors. They wore feathers in their hair. They carried weapons that caught the light of the setting suns. They moved together like one giant creature. They moved with purpose. Maya felt her blood turn cold. They were coming for her. They were going to kill her. She grabbed her plasma rifle, but her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped it. What good was one rifle against an army? She had heard stories about what happened to humans who were caught by Nahua war parties. The colonial news loved to tell those stories. They loved to make the Nahua sound like monsters. The warriors made a huge circle around her trading post. There were so many of them. 700 at least. Maybe more. Maya could see their faces now in the dying light. They looked hard and determined. They had come here to do something and they would not leave until it was done. Maya made a choice. If she was going to die, she would die standing up. She would die outside under the sky. She put down her rifle and walked out the door. Her legs felt weak, but she did not fall. She stood in front of her trading post and waited for whatever was coming. The circle of warriors opened up. Someone walked through the opening. Maya felt her breath catch in her throat. It was Tenok. But he looked different now. He was standing straight and tall. He walked with only a small limp. The bandages were gone. He wore traditional warrior clothes now. His chest was painted with symbols. but it was his golden eyes that held her attention. They were bright and intense and full of something she could not name. Tenoch stopped in front of Maya. He put his fist over his heart. Maya knew this was a Nahua way of showing respect. She had seen it in old videos from when humans first came to this planet, back when both sides still hoped they could be friends. Tenoch spoke in a voice that carried across the silent desert. He said Maya had saved his life. When he was dying in the sand, she gave him her water. Her only water. The water she needed to survive. He said that among his people such an act created a debt that could not be repaid with simple words. She did not just save a life. She saved the honor of the Red Canyon clan. Maya's throat was too dry to speak. She just stood there holding on to her courage while Tenoch kept talking. He said he was the son of Chief Sipple. Maya had treated him with more kindness than any human had shown the Nahua in all the years since the colonists arrived. He said that Maya Collins was now under the protection of the Nahua people. Then Tenoch turned to face the warriors around them. He said 700 warriors stood as witnesses. Anyone who wanted to harm Maya would have to go through all of them first. A huge roar went up from the assembled warriors. It was so loud Maya felt it in her chest. The warriors raised their weapons high, but not as a threat. They were saluting her. Maya felt her legs go weak. She almost fell, but she forced herself to stay standing. She told Tenoch she did not understand what was happening. Her voice came out as a whisper. Tenoch's expression became softer. He said she had shown him humanity in the truest sense. For that his people offered their protection, but there was more. His father wanted to speak with her. There were matters that concerned both their peoples. Maya had proven herself worthy of trust. Before Maya could ask what he meant, two warriors stepped forward. They were carrying huge clay vessels. They put the vessels at Maya's feet and removed the lids. Inside was water. Clean, pure water that sparkled in the twilight. More water than Maya had seen in months. Tenoch spoke quietly now. He said they knew her supply shuttle had not come. They knew many things about what happened in the human settlements. This water was a gift. It was only a small part of what she had given him, but it would keep her alive until her people remembered she existed out here in the desert. Maya dropped to her knees beside the vessels of water. She started to cry. Big, heavy sobs that she had been holding inside for weeks. The warriors stood silent around her. Somehow their presence felt comforting instead of scary. They were not here to hurt her. They were here to honor her. When Maya finally looked up, Tenoch was offering her his hand. He asked if she would come with them. Would she meet his father and maybe help both their peoples find a way forward? Maya looked at his hand for a long moment. Then she took it and let him pull her to her feet. She said yes. It was all she could say. It was all she needed to say. The journey to the Red Canyon took 3 days. Maya rode on a creature the Nahua called a saran. It looked like a horse mixed with a lizard. Its scales changed colors in the sunlight. The creature was strange, but it moved smoothly across the sand. Tenoch rode beside her on his own saran. The 700 warriors formed a protective wall around them as they traveled. No human had ever seen the Red Canyon before. It was sacred ground. The Nahua did not allow outsiders there. But as they climbed the final ridge and Maya looked down at the settlement below, her breath stopped in her chest. She finally understood why the Nahua fought so hard to protect their world. The Red Canyon was beautiful, not in the cold mechanical way of human colonies. This place had an organic harmony that made Maya want to cry. Buildings seemed to grow right out of the rock itself. They were decorated with the same geometric patterns she had seen on Tenoch's arms. Gardens grew in places that should have been impossible. Underground springs turned the canyon into an oasis of green in the middle of the red desert. Children played in the streets below. Their laughter echoed off the canyon walls. Old people sat in the shade weaving cloth or telling stories. This was a real civilization. It was rich and complex and alive, nothing like the primitive savages the colonial news talked about. Those news reports were lies, all lies. The people of the canyon stopped what they were doing to watch the procession pass. Some looked curious, others looked angry. Maya understood their anger. She represented everything that threatened their way of life. She was the face of the people who were destroying their world piece by piece. Chief Sipple was waiting in a place Tenoch called the Council Hall. It was a huge chamber lit by plants that glowed with blue light. The chief looked like an older version of Tenoch. He was tall and dignified. His black hair had silver threads running through it. His golden eyes were sharp and intelligent. The chief spoke Maya's name with barely any accent. He said his son told him she saved Tenok's life. Maya said anyone would have done the same thing. But even as she said it, she knew it was not true. Most humans would have let Tenok die in the desert. Chief Sipil shook his head. He said no. Most would not help. The human people had taken much from the Nahua, land and water and dignity. They broke treaties and ignored protests. And yet when Maya had the chance to let one of them die, she chose compassion instead. The chief told her to sit down. The chief's words became very serious. He said war was coming. His people were tired of being pushed aside. Tired of watching human mining operations poison their water and destroy their sacred sites. The colonial government did not listen to words anymore. So the Nahua would speak in a language the humans understood. The language of violence. Maya felt cold fear run through her body. She asked how many people would die. The chief's face looked sad and old. He said too many on both sides. That was why he wanted to meet Maya. She was proof that not all humans were blind to Nahua suffering. He wanted to know if Maya believed there could be peace between their peoples. Maya thought about the question for a long time. She thought about the human colonies with their greed and their weapons. She thought about the Nahua with their ancient culture and their justified anger. She thought about her father who always said there had to be a better way. Finally she spoke. She said yes. She believed peace was possible, but only if both sides were willing to really listen to each other. The chief studied her face for what felt like forever. Then he nodded slowly. He said Maya would stay in the Red Canyon for a time. She would learn about the Nahua people. She would see what the human colonies had done to them, and then maybe she could help build a bridge between two worlds that seemed determined to destroy each other. The days that followed changed everything Maya thought she knew about the world. She learned the Nahua language, or at least started to. The words were strange but beautiful. She ate their food, which was nothing like human rations. It was fresh and flavored with herbs she had never tasted before. She listened to their stories, which went back thousands of years. Tenok became her guide and teacher. He showed her the places where human mining operations had destroyed ancient burial grounds, places that had been sacred for longer than human civilization existed. He showed her streams that used to run clear, but now ran with chemical poison from the mines. He showed her villages that had been abandoned because the humans took all the water. Every day Maya felt more ashamed of what her people had done. The colonists came to this planet and treated it like an empty resource to be exploited. They never considered that someone already lived here. Or if they did consider it, they decided it did not matter. Human needs came first. Always. On the 7th day, Maya sat with Tenok overlooking the canyon. The 2 moons had risen and everything glowed with silver light. It was peaceful and beautiful. Tenok told her the colonial government would not make peace easy. They had too much to lose if they acknowledged Nahua rights. The mining corporations made huge profits from this planet. They would fight to keep those profits. Maya said she knew it would be hard. But the Nahua deserved better than to be driven from their homes. They deserved to live on their own planet without fear. Tenok was quiet for a moment. Then he told Maya what happened to him in the desert. How he got wounded. A human mining operation had expanded into a sacred burial ground. The Nahua went to protest peacefully. They showed the humans the markers that said this land was protected by old treaties, but the humans opened fire on them. Tenok was shot. Many others died. He was one of the lucky ones who got away. He crawled through the desert for days before Maya found him. Maya felt sick hearing this story. She said she was sorry. Tenok looked at her with his golden eyes. He said she should not be sorry. She should help make sure it never happened again. That was worth more than any apology. That night, Maya lay awake in the small room they had given her. She thought about everything she had learned, about the beauty of Nahua culture, about the crimes the colonists had committed, about the war that was coming unless someone stopped it. An idea began to form in her mind. It was dangerous and maybe stupid, but it might be the only chance for peace. The next morning, Maya asked to speak with Chief Sipil again. He met her in the council hall with Tenok and other clan leaders present. Maya took a deep breath and told them her plan. She would go to the colonial capital. She would tell them what she had seen in the Red Canyon. She would tell them what the Nahua people were really like. She would fight for fair treaties and real negotiations. The chief asked what would happen if the colonial government refused to listen. Maya said then at least she tried. At least she could say she stood on the right side when it mattered. The clan leaders whispered to each other. Some looked doubtful. Others looked hopeful. Finally, the chief nodded. He said Maya had already proven her courage. If she believed she could make the humans see reason, the Nahua would support her. But he warned her that if the humans chose war, the Nahua would fight. They would fight for every meter of their homeland, and they would not surrender. Tenoch stepped forward after his father spoke. He said he would go with Maya to the colonial capital. He would go as his father's representative and as Maya's protector. If the humans were going to take Maya seriously, they needed to see that she had the full support of the Red Canyon clan. The other clan leaders agreed. It was decided. The journey to the human capital would take many days. Maya and Tenoch prepared carefully. They gathered documents showing the treaty violations. They collected evidence of the mining damage. They recorded testimony from Nahua elders who remembered when humans first arrived. Everything they needed to prove their case. On the night before they left, Maya sat alone looking at the stars. There were so many stars above the canyon. Back in the human cities, the lights drowned them out. But here the sky was full of brilliant points of light. Each one was a sun, maybe, with its own planets. Maybe with its own people making the same mistakes humans made here. Tenoch found her there. He sat down beside her without saying anything at first. They just looked at the stars together. Finally, Tenoch spoke. He said the Nahua believed the stars were the spirits of ancestors watching over them. Each star was someone who lived a good life and earned a place in the sky. Maya thought that was a beautiful belief. Tenoch asked if Maya was scared about what they were going to do. Maya thought about lying, but decided on truth instead. She said yes. She was terrified. The colonial government had all the power. They had weapons and money and the support of Earth. What did she and Tenoch have? Just words and hope. Tenoch smiled. He said sometimes words and hope were enough. Sometimes they were all you needed. They left at dawn. A small group of warriors escorted them to the edge of Nahua territory. Then it was just Maya and Tenoch traveling toward the human lands. The landscape changed as they got closer to the capital. The red desert gave way to scraped earth and mine tailings. The air smelled of chemicals and smoke. Maya felt ashamed all over again. The colonial capital was called New Geneva. It sprawled across the coastal plain like a wound on the planet's surface. Everything was metal and concrete and plastic. There were no trees, no gardens, just buildings and roads and industrial zones. Maya had been here once before with her father when she was 12 years old. She remembered hating it then. She hated it even more now. Arriving at the transport station with Tenoch caused exactly the reaction Maya expected. Colonial security guards tried to arrest Tenoch immediately. But Maya had sent messages ahead. She invoked old diplomatic protocols that most people had forgotten about. Protocols that said representatives of indigenous peoples had certain protections. The security guards were angry, but they had to let Tenoch pass. They were taken to the government complex. It was a huge building made of glass and steel. Inside, everything was cold and sterile. People in expensive clothes walked around looking important. None of them even glanced at the Nahua man walking through their halls. It was like Tenoch did not exist to them. Maya felt her anger growing. The colonial governor was a man named Henry Palmer. His office was on the top floor with windows overlooking the artificial harbor. He was younger than Maya expected, maybe 40 years old. He had the kind of eyes that looked at people and saw numbers instead of humans, or in Tenoch's case, saw nothing at all. Governor Palmer sat behind his big desk and looked at Maya. He did not acknowledge Tenoch, who stood beside her. Palmer said Maya's messages had been very concerning. He used words like consorting and seditious. He made it sound like Maya was a criminal instead of someone trying to prevent a war. Maya kept her voice calm and level. She said she was not spreading propaganda. She was spreading truth. The Nahua were not the enemy. They were the original people of this planet. The colonists had violated almost every treaty they made with them. It was wrong and it had to stop. Palmer waved his hand like he was brushing away an annoying insect. He said the treaties were made decades ago by politicians who did not understand what resources this planet held. The situation had evolved. The colonies needed the mining operations. Earth itself needed the minerals they extracted. Progress required sacrifice. Tenoch finally spoke. His voice was calm but filled with strength. He asked the governor a direct question. What about his people? Did they not matter? Did Nahua lives have no value at all? Palmer looked at Tenoch for the first time. Maya saw cold dismissal in the governor's eyes. Like he was looking at an animal instead of a person. Palmer said the Nahua mattered, of course. But progress mattered more. Humanity's expansion mattered more. If the Nahua were reasonable, they would see that integration with human society was in their best interest. Tenoch repeated the word integration. His voice was bitter. He said Palmer meant assimilation, the destruction of Nahua culture and language. Everything that made them who they were. The meeting got worse from there. Palmer refused to consider any changes to the mining contracts. He refused to acknowledge that sacred sites had been violated. He treated every Nahua concern like an obstacle to be overcome instead of a legitimate problem. Maya felt her hope draining away with every word the governor spoke. Maya tried showing him the evidence they brought. Photos of destroyed burial grounds, chemical analysis of poisoned water, testimony from elders. Palmer glanced at it all and pushed it aside. He said the mining corporations had their own studies that showed everything was fine. He would trust corporate science over native claims any day. Finally, Maya could not contain her anger anymore. She stood up and her voice rose. She told Palmer that war was coming. When it did, history would remember which side he chose. History would remember that he had a chance to do the right thing and refused. Palmer smiled. It was a cold smile that had no warmth in it. He said history was written by the winners, and the colonial government had orbital weapons platforms that could turn the Red Canyon into melted glass in one afternoon. He suggested Maya remember that before she made threats. He suggested she think about which side would actually win this war. Security guards escorted them out of the building. Maya felt numb. Her plan had failed completely. Palmer was not going to help. He was not even going to try. The colonial government would rather commit genocide than give up their mining profits. Tenoch walked beside her in silence. His face showed no emotion, but Maya knew he was thinking the same thing she was. War was inevitable now. They went to a small hotel in the outer part of the city. It was cheap and dirty, but it was all they could afford. Maya sat on the bed and put her head in her hands. She had failed. She had tried to build a bridge between two peoples, and it collapsed before she even finished building it. Tenoch sat beside her. He put his hand on her shoulder. He said she had not failed. She had tried. That was more than anyone else had done. Maya looked up at him. She said trying was not enough. People were going to die, maybe thousands of people, and she could not stop it. Tenoch's golden eyes were sad but firm. He said maybe she could not stop the war, but she could still make a difference. The fight was not over yet. That night Maya barely slept. She kept thinking about Palmer's cold smile and his threats. She kept thinking about the orbital weapons that could destroy the Red Canyon, about the children she had seen playing in the streets there, about the old people telling stories, about Tenoch's father and all the other clan leaders who had put their trust in her. When dawn came, Maya had made a decision. If the colonial governor would not listen, then she would go around him. She would tell her story to anyone who would listen, the colonists, the people back on Earth, anyone. She would make them see what was really happening on this planet. It was a long shot, but it was all she had left. Maya started making recordings the very next day. She borrowed equipment from a sympathetic journalist who worked for one of the smaller news outlets. The big corporate media would never give her airtime. They were too connected to the mining companies. But smaller independent journalists still existed, people who cared more about truth than profit. In the recordings, Maya told her story. She talked about finding Tenoch dying in the desert, about sharing her water with him even though it meant risking her own life, about the 700 warriors who came to honor that debt, about the week she spent in the Red Canyon learning about Nahua culture, about the beauty and complexity of their civilization, about the crimes the colonial government had committed against them. Tenoch sat beside her during the recordings. He told his side of the story, how the mining operation had opened fire on peaceful protesters, how he crawled through the desert for days with his wounds bleeding, how a human girl saved him when his own people could not reach him. His testimony was powerful because it was simple and true. They sent the recordings everywhere, to Earth, to the Colonial Oversight Committee, to every news organization they could find, to social media platforms, to anyone who might care that an entire civilization was about to be destroyed. At first nothing happened. The recordings disappeared into the vast ocean of information that flowed between the stars. Then something unexpected occurred. People started watching. First just a few, then hundreds, then thousands, then millions. The recordings spread like wildfire across the communication networks. People on Earth and the other colonies had never heard the Nahua side of the story before. They had only seen what the corporate media wanted them to see. Propaganda about primitive natives standing in the way of progress. But Maya's testimony was different. She was one of them. A colonist. She had no reason to lie. And Tenoch beside her was proof that the Nahua were not the savages the media portrayed. He spoke perfect English. He was educated and articulate. He talked about his culture with pride and pain. People could not ignore that. The response was overwhelming. Protests erupted on Earth. Millions of people took to the streets demanding that the colonial government respect Nahua rights. In New Geneva itself, colonists began demonstrating outside the government buildings. They carried signs calling for justice and peace. The Colonial Oversight Committee announced they would launch a formal investigation into treaty violations. Governor Palmer tried to shut it down. He had Maya and Tenoch arrested on charges of inciting rebellion. But the arrest only made things worse. The journalist who helped them publish the arrest records, people saw it as proof that the government had something to hide. The protests grew larger and angrier. Maya and Tenoch spent 2 days in a colonial jail cell. It was small and cold and miserable, but Maya felt hope for the first time since meeting with Palmer. They had reached people. Their message had gotten through. Maybe it would be enough. Tenoch was less optimistic. He said the colonial government would not give up their power easily. They would fight to keep what they had stolen. He was right. On the 3rd day in jail, they learned that Palmer had ordered a military operation against the Red Canyon. Despite the protests and the investigations, he was moving forward with his plans. He would destroy the Nahua before anyone could stop him. The orbital weapons were being prepared. Ground forces were mobilizing. Maya felt sick with fear. All her efforts had not been enough. Palmer was going to commit genocide, and there was nothing she could do to stop it from inside a jail cell. She pounded on the cell door and screamed for the guards. She begged them to let her make a call, to let her warn someone, but they just ignored her. Then something strange happened. The power in the jail went out. Emergency lights came on, casting everything in a red glow. Maya heard shouting from somewhere outside the cell. The sound of running feet. Something was wrong. Tenoch stood and pressed his ear to the door, trying to hear what was happening. Their cell door opened. A colonial guard stood there, but he looked different. He had removed his helmet and his face showed shame and determination mixed together. He said they needed to leave now. He would help them escape. Maya asked why he was doing this. The guard said he had watched their recordings. He had 3 children of his own. He could not be part of genocide. Not for any amount of money. The guard led them through the darkened jail to a back exit. Other guards saw them but did nothing to stop them. Some even nodded as they passed. Maya realized her message had reached deeper than she thought. Even here in the heart of colonial power, there were people who still had consciences. People who would not follow evil orders. Outside the jail, the city was in chaos. Protesters had shut down major roads. Workers at the spaceport had gone on strike, refusing to service the military ships. Even some of the colonial military forces were refusing orders. Palmer's attempt to destroy the Red Canyon was falling apart before it even began. But Palmer still had the orbital weapons. They did not need human crews. They could be fired remotely from the government complex. Tenoch grabbed Maya's arm. He said they had to get to the weapons control center. They had to stop the launch somehow. Maya did not know how 2 people could stop orbital weapons, but she ran with Tenoch through the chaotic streets anyway. They reached the government complex to find it surrounded by protesters. Thousands of people chanting and demanding that Palmer stand down. Colonial security forces stood between the protesters and the building, but they looked uncertain. Some had lowered their weapons. The society was tearing itself apart over this decision. Maya pushed through the crowd. She had to get inside, had to reach someone in authority who would listen. A security captain recognized her from the recordings. Instead of arresting her again, he grabbed her arm and pulled her aside. He said the weapons would launch in 30 minutes. Palmer had locked himself in the control room with loyal guards. No one could reach him. Then a message came through on the security captain's radio. It was from one of the orbital weapons platforms. The crew up there had received Maya's recordings too. They were refusing the launch orders. The other platforms were reporting the same thing. Human beings would not fire weapons of genocide no matter who gave the orders. The security captain looked at Maya with something like awe. He said she had done it. She had made people care enough to refuse. Palmer could give all the orders he wanted, but without people willing to follow them, he was powerless. The orbital weapons would not fire. The ground forces were standing down. The war was over before it started. Maya felt her legs give out. She sat down hard on the pavement. Tenok knelt beside her and they held each other. Around them, the protesters began to realize what had happened. A cheer went up that shook the buildings. People were crying and laughing and hugging strangers. They had stopped a war. Together, they had chosen compassion over profit. Humanity over corporate interest. Governor Palmer was removed from office that same day. The Colonial Oversight Committee arrived within a week to begin formal treaty negotiations with the Nahua. It would take years to undo all the damage. Years to rebuild trust. But it was a start. It was more than anyone had dared hope for just days before. Maya and Tenok were released from all charges. They were celebrated as heroes by some and condemned as traitors by others. The mining corporations hated them. The corporate media tried to destroy their reputations. But none of that mattered. They had prevented the destruction of an entire people. That was worth any amount of criticism or hatred. The treaty negotiations took place in a neutral location, halfway between New Geneva and the Red Canyon. A temporary structure was built just for this purpose. It had rooms for both human and Nahua delegates, translators, security, everything needed for what everyone knew would be long and difficult talks. Chief Sipil led the Nahua delegation. With him came representatives from all the major clans, warriors and elders and scholars, people who understood their own history and laws better than any human ever could. The human side had the Colonial Oversight Committee. They brought lawyers and bureaucrats and economists, two very different groups trying to find common ground. Maya was asked to participate as an advisor to both sides. It was an unusual position. She was human, but she had lived with the Nahua. She understood both perspectives better than almost anyone. Tenok was there too, representing his father and the Red Canyon clan. Together they worked to bridge the gap between two civilizations. The first week was mostly arguing. The humans wanted to keep as much mining access as possible. The Nahua wanted the humans to leave their planet entirely. Neither side would budge. Maya sat through hours of angry speeches and accusations. She wondered if any agreement was possible. The wounds were so deep, the distrust so strong that an elder named Sitlali spoke. She was very old. Her hair was completely white. She had seen the first human ships land on this planet 70 years ago. She remembered when there had been hope for friendship between the species. She spoke about those early days, about shared meals and exchanged gifts, about humans and Nahua working together before greed destroyed everything. Sitlali said both sides had to choose. They could hold on to their anger and their hurt and destroy each other, or they could try to rebuild what had been lost. It would not be easy. It would not be quick. But it was possible if both sides truly wanted it. Her words created a shift in the room. Something softened. People began to really listen to each other for the first time. The breakthrough came in the second week. A compromise was suggested. The mining operations would continue but under strict environmental controls. Nahua representatives would have oversight authority. Any site deemed sacred would be completely off limits with no exceptions. The Nahua would receive a percentage of mining profits to rebuild communities damaged by previous operations. And most importantly, both sides would form joint councils to make decisions about the planet's future together. It was not perfect. The Nahua were still giving up things they should never have had to surrender. But it was better than war. It was better than genocide. Chief Sipil accepted the terms with dignity. He said his people would honor this agreement as long as the humans did the same. If there were violations, the Nahua would walk away, and there would be no third chance. The treaty was signed 1 month after Maya first shared her water with Tenok. It seemed impossible that so much had changed in such a short time. But then Maya thought about all the small decisions that led here. Her choice to help a dying warrior. Tenok's choice to honor that debt. The colonial guard who let them escape. The soldiers who refused to fire the orbital weapons. Every single person who chose compassion over convenience. After the signing ceremony, Maya stood outside and watched both groups mingle awkwardly. Some humans and Nawa were already trying to communicate, finding common words, sharing cautious smiles. It would take a generation or more before real trust existed. But this was a start, a fragile beginning to something that might one day be called friendship. Tenoch found her there. He looked tired, but there was something like hope in his golden eyes. He said his father wanted to offer Maya a position. She would be the first human ambassador to the Nahua, living in the Red Canyon but traveling between both worlds, building connections, solving problems before they became conflicts. Maya was surprised by the offer. She asked if the Nahua would really accept a human living among them. Tenoch smiled. He said they would accept her. She had proven herself when it mattered most. The Nahua valued actions over words. Maya had acted. She had risked everything for people who were not her own. That kind of courage was respected. She would be welcomed. Maya thought about her little trading post sitting empty in the desert, about the life she had been living before all this started, lonely and desperate and slowly dying. This was better. This was something worth living for. She accepted the position. The next day she moved her few belongings to the Red Canyon. Chief Sipple gave her rooms in a building overlooking the canyon. She had windows on all sides with views of the gardens and the glowing buildings. It was beautiful. Every morning she woke up and could barely believe this was her life now. The work was hard. There were constant disputes to mediate, mining companies trying to push boundaries, Nahua clans angry about broken promises. Maya spent her days going back and forth trying to keep both sides talking instead of fighting. Some days she succeeded. Some days she failed. But she never stopped trying. Tenoch worked beside her. Officially, he was her liaison to the Nahua councils. Unofficially, he had become something more. A friend. Maybe something beyond friendship, though neither of them had put words to it yet. They spent long hours together traveling between communities, sharing meals, talking late into the night about how to build a better world. 6 months after the treaty signing, there was a celebration in the Red Canyon. The Festival of New Beginnings. Chief Sipple said it was an ancient holiday that had not been observed in decades. But now there was reason to celebrate again. Hope had returned. The festival lasted 3 days. There was music and dancing and food. Humans were invited. Hundreds came from the colonies. It was strange seeing both groups together, but it was also wonderful. Maya stood on a cliff overlooking the festival on the final night. Below her, humans and Nahua mixed together. Children of both species played games together. She saw a human woman trying to learn a Nahua dance while everyone laughed. She saw a Nahua man teaching a group of human kids how to weave. Small moments. Simple kindnesses. But they added up to something bigger. Something that looked like peace. Tenoch joined her on the cliff. They stood side by side watching the celebration below. He said she had changed everything. Maya shook her head. She said she just shared some water. The Nahua did the rest. Tenoch turned to look at her. His golden eyes were warm. He said no. She showed them that humanity was more than its worst examples. She proved that humans were capable of choosing the right path even when it was difficult. That changed everything. Maya felt emotion rise in her throat. She asked Tenoch what he thought the future would bring. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he did not know. There would be more problems. More conflicts. Growing pains as two civilizations learned to coexist. But he believed they would make it work. Because there were people like Maya on both sides. People who chose compassion. People who chose to see others as worthy of dignity. They watched the 2 moons rise over the canyon. The silver light made everything look peaceful and perfect. Maya knew reality would be harder than this moment suggested. There would be setbacks and failures. Times when the treaty almost broke. But there would also be victories. Friendships formed. Understanding built. Trust earned slowly and carefully. It would be worth the struggle. She was sure of that now. Tenoch reached out and took her hand. Maya looked down at their joined hands. Human and Nahua. Different but not so different that they could not find common ground. She squeezed his fingers gently. He squeezed back. No words were needed. They both understood what this moment meant. It was a promise. A commitment. They would build this bridge together no matter how long it took. 2 years passed. The treaty held but not without strain. There were incidents. A mining crew accidentally damaged a sacred spring. A group of young Nahua warriors attacked a transport convoy in revenge. Each incident threatened to unravel everything. Each time Maya and Tenoch worked frantically to keep both sides talking instead of fighting. The hardest part was dealing with people who did not want peace. On the human side, there were corporations that resented the new regulations. They paid people to spread propaganda about Nahua violence. They lobbied Earth politicians to weaken the treaty. On the Noah side, there were clans who believed any cooperation with humans was betrayal. They wanted to drive the colonists off the planet completely. Maya felt like she was constantly putting out fires. She spent weeks at a time traveling between settlements mediating disputes. She barely slept. She forgot to eat. Tenoch worried about her. He said she would burn out if she did not slow down. But Maya could not slow down. Too much depended on keeping this fragile peace alive. Then came the crisis that nearly destroyed everything. A mining operation discovered a massive mineral deposit in the Northern Territories. The minerals were rare and extremely valuable. Earth was willing to pay enormous amounts for them. The mining corporation applied for permits to begin extraction immediately. There was just one problem. The deposit was directly under a site the Nahua considered the most sacred place on the entire planet. The Yaoi site was called the Cradle of Stars. According to Nahua belief, it was where their ancestors first emerged into this world thousands of years ago. Every clan traced their origins back to this place. It was more than sacred. It was the foundation of their entire culture. To destroy it would be to destroy the Nahua people themselves. The mining corporation did not care about any of that. They saw only profit. Billions of dollars in minerals sitting underground. They pressured the colonial government. They pressured Earth. They said the treaty was killing economic growth. They said the Nahua were being unreasonable. They demanded access to the Cradle of Stars. Chief Zippel called an emergency meeting of all the clan leaders. Maya was invited. She sat in the council hall and listened as speaker after speaker expressed their rage. They had compromised so much already. They had allowed mining on lands their people had used for generations. They had accepted pollution and disruption and loss, but this was too much. The Cradle of Stars was non-negotiable. The mood in the chamber was dark. Maya heard calls for war. Young warriors stood and volunteered to fight. Some clan leaders who had supported the treaty now said it was a mistake. They said humans would never respect Nahua rights. They said the only language humans understood was violence. Maya felt the peace she had worked so hard to build crumbling around her. Chief Zippel raised his hand for silence. The chamber went quiet. He looked at Maya and his expression was sad. He said the Nahua had trusted the treaty. They had believed humans would keep their word. But now it seemed that belief was misplaced. He asked Maya directly, could she make the humans understand? Could she make them see that some things were more important than money? Maya stood. Her voice shook, but she forced herself to speak clearly. She said yes. She would make them understand. She would go to Earth itself if she had to. She would tell the whole human race what was at stake. But she needed time. She needed the Nahua to give her one more chance. The chief considered her words. Then he nodded. 2 weeks? She had 2 weeks to stop the mining permit. After that, the Nahua would do what they had to do. Maya left the council hall and went straight to the communications center. She sent messages to everyone she could think of on Earth. Politicians, activists, news organizations, religious leaders, anyone who might care about preserving an indigenous culture. She explained what the Cradle of Stars meant to the Nahua. She explained that destroying it would be cultural genocide. She begged them to intervene. The response was mixed. Some people supported her immediately. They organized protests and started petition campaigns, but others said she was being naive. They said economic growth had to come first. They said the Nahua should adapt to modern reality. Maya felt despair growing in her chest. Was it going to happen again? Would greed win over compassion? Tenoch stood by her through all of it. He helped her write messages and coordinate with supporters. But Maya could see the doubt in his eyes. He was losing faith that humans would do the right thing. She did not blame him. She was starting to lose faith too. On the 10th day, the colonial government announced they were going to approve the mining permit. They said economic necessity outweighed cultural concerns. They said the Nahua would be compensated with money. Maya stared at the announcement in disbelief. They were really going to do it. They were going to destroy the Cradle of Stars for profit. All her work meant nothing. The treaty meant nothing. Human greed would win again just like it always did. She sat down and put her head in her hands. She had failed. War was coming and she could not stop it. Then Tenoch showed her something. A message from Earth. Millions of people were marching in the streets. Not thousands. Millions. In every major city across the planet, humans were demanding that the mining permit be revoked. They carried signs with pictures of the Cradle of Stars. They chanted Nawa songs. The protests were so massive they shut down entire cities. Maya read message after message. Regular people saying they were ashamed of what their government was doing. Saying that money was not worth destroying another culture. Saying that humanity had to be better than this. The voices grew louder and louder until they could not be ignored. Even politicians who supported the mining corporation started changing their positions. The pressure was too great. On the 13th day, Earth's central government overruled the colonial authorities. The mining permit was denied. Furthermore, new protections were put in place. Any site deemed sacred by indigenous populations would be permanently off limits. The law was binding. Even the corporations could not overturn it. The Cradle of Stars was safe. Maya cried when she heard the news. Tenoch held her while she sobbed with relief. They had done it. Humanity had chosen compassion over profit. Not all of humanity. There were still people angry about the decision. Still corporations vowing to fight it. But enough humans had chosen correctly. Enough people cared. That was what mattered. Chief Sepal summoned Maya to the council hall. She went expecting gratitude. Instead, the chief looked serious. He said the Nahua owed her a great debt. She had proven twice now that some humans could be trusted. But he also said something else. The real victory was not what Maya did. It was what millions of humans on Earth did. They stood up for what was right, even though it cost them nothing personally. That was the real proof that peace was possible. Maya understood what he meant. She was just one person, one voice. But she had helped millions of other humans find their own voices. She had shown them what was happening and trusted them to care. And they did care. That was the real miracle. Not that one girl shared her water with a dying warrior, but that millions of people saw that story and decided they wanted to be like her. They wanted to choose compassion too. The treaty was strengthened after the crisis. New provisions were added. More protections. Better oversight. The mining corporations were furious, but they had lost. Public opinion had turned against them. They could not operate without social license. And that license had been revoked by millions of humans who decided indigenous rights mattered more than corporate profits. Maya felt something change inside her after that. She had been carrying so much weight, so much responsibility, trying to save the world by herself. But she did not have to do it alone. There were millions of people out there who cared. Who would fight for justice if given the chance? Her job was not to save everyone. It was to connect them, to help them find each other, to build a movement larger than any one person. 5 years after Maya shared her water with Tenoch, the world looked very different. The changes came slowly, but they were real. Human settlements began incorporating Nahua architecture. Gardens appeared where there had only been concrete. The harsh lines of colonial design softened. Both cultures were learning from each other. Schools taught both human and Nahua history now. Children grew up speaking both languages. Maya watched a new generation being born, kids who did not carry the old prejudices, who saw each other as friends instead of enemies. It gave her hope for the future. These children would inherit a world where cooperation was normal instead of impossible. Maya still lived in the Red Canyon, but she traveled constantly. She gave speeches on Earth and the other colonies. She told her story over and over. How one small act of kindness had changed everything. How choosing compassion had prevented a war. People needed to hear that message. In a universe that often seemed dark and cruel, they needed to know that individual choices mattered. Her old trading post became a symbol. Pilgrims visited it from both human and Nahua communities. They left offerings there, water bottles and carved stones and flowers. It was a shrine to the possibility of peace. Maya went back sometimes to sit in the shade of that rusty metal roof. She thought about the girl she had been, desperate and dying in the desert. How could that girl have known what her simple choice would lead to? Tenoch proposed to her on a clear night under the twin moons. They were standing on the same cliff where they had watched the Festival of New Beginnings years before. He said he wanted to spend his life building bridges with her. Maya said yes before he even finished asking. They were married in a ceremony that blended both human and Nawa traditions. Chief Sipil performed the ritual. Half the wedding guests were human, half were Nawa. It felt like a promise for the future. Their daughter was born a year later. They named her Citlali after the elder who had helped save the peace talks. She had Maya's brown hair and Tenoch's golden eyes. She was beautiful and strange and perfect, the first child born to both worlds. Maya held her tiny daughter and felt overwhelming love mixed with fear. What kind of world would Citlali grow up in? Would the peace last? Would humans and Nawa learn to truly coexist? There were still problems, of course. Prejudice did not disappear overnight. Some humans still saw the Nahua as inferior. Some Nahua still saw humans as invaders. There were fights and protests and angry words. But there was also progress. Slow, painful progress. Joint councils made decisions about resource management. Mixed communities formed where both species lived side by side. Understanding grew one conversation at a time. The mining corporations adapted or died. Those that refused to follow the new environmental regulations lost their permits. Those that learned to work with the Nahua instead of against them prospered. It turned out that cooperation was actually more profitable in the long run. Workers were happier. Communities were more stable. Even the bottom line improved when everyone had a stake in success. Maya's story spread beyond this one planet. Other human colonies with indigenous populations began negotiating their own treaties. The model developed here became a template. It was not perfect, but it was better than war, better than genocide. Other worlds reached out to Maya asking for advice. She helped where she could, but always said the real work had to be done by the people who lived there. She could only share what she learned. They had to make their own choices. On the 5th anniversary of the treaty, there was a huge celebration, bigger than the Festival of New Beginnings. People came from across the planet and beyond, humans and Nawa, and even representatives from other alien species who had heard about the peace. It lasted a week. There was music and dancing and feasting. Maya walked through the crowds holding Citlali's hand and marveled at what they had built together. Chief Sipil gave a speech on the final day. He was much older now, his hair completely white, but his voice was still strong. He talked about how close they had come to destroying each other, how fear and greed nearly won, but then one human girl chose differently. She chose to see a dying warrior as someone worth saving. That choice rippled outward. It touched millions of hearts. It changed the course of history. The chief looked at Maya as he spoke. He said she had not just saved his son's life. She had saved both their peoples. She had shown them a different path. A harder path, but a better one. The path of understanding instead of conquest. Of cooperation instead of domination. He said future generations would tell her story. They would remember the girl who shared her water and changed the world. Maya felt uncomfortable with all the praise. She did not feel like a hero. She just did what seemed right in the moment. But Tenoch reminded her that most people did not do what seemed right. They did what was easy or profitable or safe, choosing compassion when it cost her everything. That was what made her special. That was what changed everything. As the celebration wound down, Maya stood alone for a moment watching the twin suns set over the Red Canyon. The sky turned orange and purple just like it had on that first day when she met Tenoch. So much had changed since then. She had changed. The whole planet had changed. But the sky remained the same, beautiful and eternal. A reminder that some things were bigger than human conflicts or alien wars. Tenoch joined her with Citlali balanced on his hip. Their daughter was getting sleepy. Her golden eyes were half closed. Maya took Citlali from Tenoch and held her close. This little girl would grow up in a world her parents had fought to create. A world where humans and Nahua worked together instead of destroying each other. It was not a perfect world, but it was good enough. It was worth all the struggle. Maya thought about her father sometimes. He died believing his trading post was the last honest place in the colonies. He never saw what it became. A symbol of hope. A reminder that one person could make a difference. She wished he could have seen all of this. The peace. The cooperation. The future they were building. She thought he would have been proud. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Maya made a silent promise. She would keep fighting for this peace. Keep building bridges. Keep choosing compassion even when it was hard. Because that was humanity's real strength. Not their weapons or their technology, but their ability to change, to grow, to recognize their mistakes and try to do better, that was what would carry them to the stars. That was what would make them worthy of the universe they were exploring. Citlali stirred in her arms and opened her eyes. She looked up at Maya and smiled. That smile contained everything: hope and trust and love, the belief that the world was good and people were kind. Maya wanted desperately to preserve that belief, to make sure her daughter never had to learn the hard lessons she had learned. That meant continuing the work, never giving up, never letting the peace fail. Tenoch put his arm around Maya's shoulders. They stood together as a family, watching the stars appear one by one, the ancestors watching over them according to Nahua belief. Maya liked that idea, the thought that everyone who lived and loved and struggled was up there somewhere, part of something larger, part of a story that stretched back through time and forward into infinity. Maybe that was humanity's true destiny. Not to conquer the galaxy, but to find their place in it, to learn to coexist with other species, to build understanding across impossible divides. It would not be easy. There would be setbacks and failures, more wars and more suffering. But there would also be moments like this, moments of peace and hope, moments when people chose compassion over cruelty. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all anyone could ask for. The twin moons rose over the canyon, bathing everything in silver light. Maya held her daughter close and felt Tenoch's warmth beside her. This moment was perfect, fleeting but perfect. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems to solve. But tonight they could rest. Tonight they could enjoy what they had built together. A future where two species learned to see each other as family instead of enemies. It all started with water shared in the desert. One bottle given to a dying stranger, such a small thing. But small things had power. Small acts of kindness rippled outward. They touched other hearts and inspired other choices. Until one small act became a movement. Until one girl's compassion changed the fate of two worlds. That was the real story. Not about heroes or grand gestures, but about simple human decency. About choosing to help someone who needed it. About being willing to share what little you had even when it might cost you everything. That was humanity at its best.